Mr. President, I now move into the main focus of my presentation: building resilience through sustainable green investments. Mr. President, we are either leaders or we are not. We are either advocates for sustainability or we are not. We are either climate change warriors or we are not. We are either defenders of the right of Jamaicans to have access to potable water or we are not. This presentation seeks to recruit leaders, advocates, warriors, and defenders of these causes today. It also seeks to explain to and update the public on the steps this administration, led by the Most Honourable Prime Minister Andrew Holness, has taken to achieve the above. Mr. President, I have no doubt that my colleagues in this chamber fit the above classifications. Mr. President, I wish to contribute towards the environmental leadership of my colleagues today, and I will ask that some packages that we've prepared be circulated to colleague senators. These, soon enough. The budget only stretches to reusable water bottles, reusable shopping bags, and trees today for my colleague parliamentarians in branded forestry pots, and I'll ask that they be circulated. In this vein, transition into the section of my presentation, as I mentioned, which deals with my portfolio responsibilities. I note, President, that the parliamentary clock appears not to be working. I now rise to begin again my contribution to the State of the Nation debate. Mr. President, on water, the fact is, for several decades, an injustice has been done to many Jamaicans who have not had access to potable water. Regrettably, as we speak, in 2022, many rural communities face this problem. However, the government of Prime Minister Holness has been taking tangible, substantial steps towards fixing the problem. We have been turning on the pipes and giving thousands more Jamaicans access to this precious commodity. Mr. President, water is an essential commodity to human life, but the sector, water rather, is an essential commodity to human life, but the sector requires strong oversight and often heavy investment. The management of water resources, along with the maintenance of water infrastructure to meet demand and the treatment of wastewater, are critical and are the responsibility of MEGJC and its agencies. This administration understands that the availability of water has an impact on the entire society, affecting all sectors: health, security, agriculture, industry, among others. Therefore, the conservation and proper use of this resource is fundamental in ensuring water security in Jamaica. The Senate might recall that the National Water Sector Policy and Implementation Plan of 2019 outlines in detail the Government of Jamaica's approach to the task of providing potable water and sanitation to Jamaicans. As part of the policy measures instituted by the Government of Jamaica to provide universal access of potable water and adequate sanitation by 2030, a multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral body, the Integrated Water Resources Management Council, was established. Jamaica's water sector is comprised of public and private sector service providers who provide potable water and sewerage services, as well as irrigation water to the population. The public and private entities that provide water, potable and irrigation, sewerage services, and oversee the management of the country's water resources are as follows. It's MEGJC, who has portfolio responsibility of the Water Resources Authority, National Water Commission, who are the main providers of potable water and sewage services, and Central Wastewater Treatment Company Limited, a subsidiary of NWC. The Ministry of Agriculture, through the National Irrigation Commission, has responsibility for the supply of agricultural water. The Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, through the municipal corporations, provide potable water and island-wide, and the Rural Water Supply Limited provides engineering consultant services in the construction of water supply systems. This is generally done where areas are remote and in some cases difficult to reach or very far from NWC systems. There are also approximately 16 private service providers in the sector that provide potable water services and sewerage services. However, they account for a small percentage of the total sector. It is important to highlight that the management of the country's watersheds are critical, Mr. President, as they affect both the quantity and quality of underground and surface water sources in Jamaica. Mr. President, in order to consolidate gains made towards water security, there are challenges we must overcome. Issues facing public entities in the provision of water include high levels of non-revenue water, inadequate storage facilities, and high energy consumption. The government of Jamaica has moved to address these issues. We have been implementing projects and programs, including the Portmore Non-Revenue Water Program, which is geared towards reducing non-revenue water. Additionally, we have pushed forward the Transformation Project, which has at its core renewable energy solutions. This project has seen the installation of solar systems at key water facilities. Installations have taken place at Leaders Avenue Pumping Station, for instance, and the floating solar panels on the Mona Dam. The aim is to reduce the consumption of energy from fossil-based fuels and to reduce the overall cost of energy in the production of water. Over time, this project is estimated to save the country billions of dollars in energy costs. Mr. President, the government of Jamaica, through PPPs, intends to provide additional sources of water to improve the delivery of quality, reliable, and continuous water supply to the population, and one such project, which is now a reality, is the Rio Cobra water treatment plant. Jamaica is not alone in facing the challenges in providing water. There are other countries in the region that face similar challenges, such as aging infrastructure, insufficient capital investment, and water losses, as well as drought events. This results in lower water availability, which often affects agriculture and water resources. Additionally, some countries lack adequate sanitation services and facilities, which makes them vulnerable to the negative impacts of inadequate waste disposal and storage systems, such as diseases. Thankfully, due to considered and deliberate development planning, Jamaica has been able to avoid some of these pitfalls. But there's a lot of work to be done, colleagues. Innovation is a key to future economic and social development in the water sector, and young people have an important role to play in its progress and advancement. Mr. President, the Water Resources Authority is the agency charged with the legal mandate to regulate, allocate, conserve, and otherwise manage the water resources of Jamaica. Abstraction, for those who are not familiar with the sector, is the removal of water from any source, either permanently or temporarily, and allocation is the discharge assigned to abstractors via abstraction licenses. Jamaica's water resources consist of groundwater, captured in both limestone and alluvial aquifers, and surface from rivers and streams. Approximately 57% of Jamaica's total land area has aquifers, limestone, alluvium, and coastal. The parish with the most water sources is St. Catherine, and I bring your attention to the screens. While the parish with the most water allocated is St. Elizabeth, and the parish with the most abstraction is St. Anne. So I'm trying to share with you what our resource usage is like, so that we're able to come to consensus on some of the way forward. Hanover has the least number of sources. The parish with the least allocation is Portland, and Manchester is the parish with the least abstraction. Mr. President, I've included in my presentation the table which you see, which has a number of water sources, and I encourage members to look. During the financial year 2022-23, the WRA intends, I'd ask for it to be circulated. I'd ask Tashana to send it out. Okay. During the financial year, the WRA intends to complete a hydromet network, which will improve 10 gauging stations and expand the real-time data platform. This system is expected to improve the monitoring station reporting, which will provide up-to-the-minute data that can be immediately accessed for data analysis. Now, that is very important for a number of reasons, as you can imagine, Sir Dan. Mr. President, the WRA has commenced the use of isotope hydrology to characterize the flow dynamics of the Rio Bueno sub-WMU. This project aims to identify the flow contributions of sinking rivers, rising springs, and the groundwater in the basin. This is expected to confirm and identify various contributions of rainfall and other flow dynamics in the basin, and better protect the water source quality, building upon the dye tracing work previously done in the sub-WMU. It will also support the baseline characteristics necessary for the comprehensive hydrological monitoring of the area. An updated water resources master plan was launched. We started the work in March 2022, sorry. For this updated plan, the impact of climate change is being factored into projections. Worldwide projections of sea levels rising means groundwater may be further compromised by saltwater intrusion. With this in mind, the need for continued intensive monitoring and regulation of groundwater abstraction is absolutely critical. Mr. President, increased temperatures also mean increased evaporation levels, affecting storage and aquifer recharge. It is easily foreseeable that in the distant future, there will be increased dependence on alternative water resources such as desalination. This immediately brings to the forefront the consideration of the water supply energy nexus as energy required for both processing and delivery components of desalination. Mr. President, as it relates to the NWC, the service that the NWC provides, given the nature of its operations, is electricity intensive. With this in mind, there is an inherent vulnerability to changes in the energy sector that could result in significant increases in the cost of energy and, by extension, the Commission's operational costs, owing to factors that are completely out of its control. For example, the increase in cost of fuel, namely crude oil, usually results in increases of the cost of electricity, one of, if not the greatest contributor to the Commission's overall operations costs. In fact, the cost of electricity accounts for more than 30% of operational expenditure of the NWC. Mr. President, this administration envisages an NWC that spends most of that 30% used for electricity currently being invested in much needed water infrastructure across the island. The communities that have no access to the seawater in their pipes once the NWC saves significantly on its energy costs. I've included in my presentation also the energy use by parish and by period so that persons have an idea. Certainly persons like Damien who are in manufacturing and Don would understand that this sort of megawatt per hour gives you an impression just of how much energy we're indeed pulling on. Mr. President, shows you by parish, and if you look back when you have time at the sources and the abstraction in the WRA table and you match that against energy, you can tell where it has deep hilly interiors and where the cost of pumping is pretty high. Yes, Kingston tends to pay that bill. But as a result of these challenges, Mr. President, it is imperative that the Commission seeks to mitigate against the increases in the cost of energy by addressing those factors over which it has control, namely its consumption of electricity and its sources. Some of these challenges facing the NWC have been around for decades, but Mr. President, this government has taken steps in order to achieve a sustainable solution to the problem. The government has made moves to effectively manage the cost of energy consumption at the NWC, while increasing the Commission's operational efficiency and effectiveness. Among the steps taken is the implementation of the renewable energy solutions, a program which will continue and indeed be expanded, colleagues. Currently, Mr. President, the NWC has installed a number of solar PV systems at the following locations: the Hamilton Gardens Pump Station, the Oxford Road offices, the Portmore Mall office, the Mona Filter Plant, which already has a 50 kilowatt PV system. The following solar systems are at implementation stage: the Forest Hills Pumping Station, Fraser's Content, and Leaders Avenue. In addition to the projects mentioned above, Mr. President, the NWC has installed a standalone solar-powered floodlights at a number of facilities across the island. This is an ongoing process which will see all perimeter lighting at all facilities converted to solar. Mr. President, it is to be noted, and I have addressed it by way of a ministerial statement in this chamber previously, that these projects are in addition to the floating solar system which is to be installed at the Mona Reservoir, which will provide in excess of $1 billion Jamaican dollars in energy savings to the NWC annually, among other previously attached benefits. The government of Jamaica is improving energy efficiency at all facilities by implementing the following improvement measures in the areas of electromechanical efficiency, with the installation of power factor correction devices. We're replacing old low-efficiency, high-powered consumption pumps with motors. We're ensuring all new equipment purchased conform to international energy efficiency benchmarks, Mr. President. We're also putting in pump system efficiency, Mr. President. The government has placed a focus on improvement on all of our pump houses. Pump system efficiency improvement is achieved by conducting detailed studies of the pump systems in order to correctly size the pumps to match the required demand for each system. This will reduce the instances of systems equipped with oversized pumps that consumed more energy than we need. We've also focused on distribution efficiency. The government, and when this was said earlier in the year, there was a hue and cry. Sometimes these things get carried in a manner which isn't understood, and that's our failing from a communication standpoint. Distribution efficiency reflects, or rather refers, to systems with water where you have tanks at elevated points. So there's no need to continue to pump to them in low peak periods. not locking off water for those who need it in peak periods, as the impression was given. So I use this opportunity to correct that misunderstanding in the public domain. So there were, I believe, 78 of such tanks that you were able to reduce pumping to in off-peak times. Mr. President, over the past several months, I've led a team from the ministry, including from the NWC, across the island. We have dubbed this initiative Turn on the Pipes Thursdays. I now receive calls from members of parliament, as you can imagine, virtually every week. Why not mine? When is mine coming? Councillors, everybody reaching out and saying what is to come. Mr. President, this reflects $2.6 billion of investment, which affects 150,000 residents island-wide that have benefited from the investment in improved water supply. Now, I know Senator Bunting needs glasses and perhaps I need stronger ones, but what you're looking at, the green dots actually reflect projects which are complete. The yellow ones with the star are also, the green dots, which are in every parish, reflect projects which are complete. The yellow ones with the star, are the ones that we had commissioning ceremonies for. The others are on and working and serving communities, but we've not had a chance. There will be no orange ones anytime soon, my friend. As we move to the next slide, colleagues, this reflects projects which are either in construction, in procurement, and waiting to get started or waiting for completion. Now, what this reflects, Mr. President, is investment into the people of Jamaica's water supply at a rate that it has never happened. Mr. President, many of these are waiting on pipe deliveries because of global supply chain disruption. Recently, while I was at COP, I had several conversations with colleague ministers who were all balling and were looking at a regional way to deal with pipe supply because our orders individually are simply too small to be in the production run as you would expect. So we will finish these very soon. The work is done, the technical designs are done. In many cases, procurement is complete, just waiting on supplies. Not for all of them, but for about 28 projects which are delayed based on pipe supply.
Mr. President, the minister's time for speaking having expired, and when I look at his presentation of 33 pages, he's less than halfway through. So I think he needs about 2 hours.
One.
Members, you would have heard the question.
Sufficient time to complete his presentation.
Thank you. Members would have heard the question, specifically that the minister be given sufficient time to complete his presentation. Those in favor? Against?
No, man, let it flow, let it flow, let it flow.
So I can slow down now. All right. Mr. President, the NWC will include electric vehicles in its fleet of vehicles. The decision has been made to purchase 5 light-duty EVs during the next vehicle procurement exercise. These vehicles will be tested for use in the metropolitan areas and then expanded. The results of these tests will then determine how NWC will move forward for the inclusion of more EVs in the fleet complement as we explore steps to make the organization more efficient and environmentally friendly in its energy use. It also will not hurt as we continue to expand our renewables capacity at pump houses across the island. Mr. President, I'd like to touch briefly on the Rio Cobra water treatment plant. Mr. President, as the government moves to improve water supply island-wide, the demand for water, especially in the Kingston metropolitan area, Portmore and Spanish Town, continues to rise as the population in these areas increase. During the 2010 drought season, there had to be some additional use of the Rio Cobra as a water source to alleviate some of the water woes facing the island. Just last week, Mr. President, the Most Honorable Prime Minister signed a public-private partnership agreement that sees a new water treatment plant to be constructed in Content St. Catherine to aid in the supply of water from the Rio Cobra. This arrangement involves the design, build, finance, operate, maintain, and transfer of a 15 million imperial gallon per day water treatment plant, Mr. President. Now we use about 180 million imperial gallons a day, so that gives you the context and the size that this plant really is. The construction time is approximately 2 years at a cost of $77 million US, Mr. President. At the end of life of the water purchase agreement, ownership of the water treatment plant, Mr. President, will be transferred to the NWC. The PPP arrangement may also be renewed if we see fit for an additional 5 years. But Mr. President, a point that is particularly important is that based on the agreed maintenance and upgrade plan built into the agreement, when ownership of this plant is handed over to the NWC, the people of Jamaica will be receiving virtually a new plant. Mr. President, the water treatment plant is a crucial part of this government's commitment to ensure potable water in the homes of Jamaicans in 2023, certainly within the corporate area, with a level of regularity that meets standards of the developed world. I understand, though I didn't hear it myself, two main concerns have been raised related to the project by one of the country's leading union bosses. These concerns have been focused on potential worker displacement and private sector involvement in the water sector. In addressing the first issue raised, I think it's important to state for the Hansard and indeed the country that this project reflects desperately needed new capacity and will displace no worker employed by the NWC. In addressing the second concern, I remind colleagues of the cost of the project. $77 million US dollars, not chicken feed. For NWC to execute a project of this size, it would mean an increase either in debt, which would be a further drag, or a further drag on the nation's consolidated funds. Neither of those options, when compared with the terms of the PPP outlined above, can be palatable. Also, when one considers that they will supply NWC, who still have to have a national conversation with the OUR, the risk, I believe, was misunderstood. This PPP agreement is a roadmap for other critical infrastructure projects, which serves to ensure that Jamaicans receive the critical services that they are due and the economy has the opportunity to grow. Mr. President, the Central Wastewater Treatment Company is a special purpose vehicle which currently owns, manages and operates 75,000 cubic meters per day at the Soapberry Wastewater Treatment Plant. The facility handles wastewater flows generated from sections of Portmore in St. Catherine and indeed Kingston and St. Andrew. The NWC is in the process of undertaking an expansion of the wastewater treatment capacity at Soapberry to manage the projected increase in wastewater flows from the corporate area. Earlier this month, Mr. President, the Cabinet gave approval to the NWC for an award of a contract to KPMG for the provision of transaction advisory services for the expansion and privatization of the Soapberry wastewater treatment plant in Jamaica. This exercise is scheduled to be completed within the next 18 months. The main objective, colleagues, of the consultancy is to undertake a complete business case for the transaction, followed by the execution of the recommended strategy. This includes the procurement phase of the transaction, leading to the successful engagement of a private sector investor or partner. Mr. President, I will move from water now to what is dubbed the triple planetary crisis. The triple planetary crisis, colleagues, refers to the three main interlinked issues that humanity currently faces: climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. Each of these issues has its own causes and effects, and each issue needs to be resolved if we are to have a viable future on this planet. Mr. President, Jamaica is not immune to any of these crises, and are indeed on the front lines of the effect of that triple planetary crisis. In that order, I believe it important to address the work of the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation in preparing the country to deal with this global crisis. Mr. President, in 2016 and even in recent times, questions have been asked regarding the reasons for the environment and climate change ministerial responsibilities to be included at MEGJC. Well, colleagues, it is our philosophy of sustainability. It is precisely because we believe that decoupling the growth and development agenda from the need to preserve and protect and indeed restore the environment has led the world to the precipice that we face. It is this administration's belief, as posited by the Most Honourable Prime Minister, that sustainable economic growth cannot come from environmental degradation, and inclusive prosperity cannot be steeped in pollution. Preservation of our environment is not a liberal or a conservative challenge. It is common sense, and that was from Ronald Reagan. Mr. President, I returned last week from COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. The world came together to examine the issue of climate change, assess progress in addressing emissions, access to finance, and to discuss new required actions, as well as the legacy of loss and damage which has ravaged the developing world. I've shown this before in this chamber. Not the best presentation on these screens, but certainly for those who are looking at their email, they'll see. What you see before you is Jamaica's climate stripes, and this is the most updated one that you're able to see. It shows Jamaica's general warming from 1900 up until 2021. So you understand why Jamaica, certainly by way of Kingston, is approaching climate departure. If you look at it on the phone, you'll see it a little clearer. This year has been another unprecedented one, Mr. President. People continue to grapple with multiple hazards, further straining already fragile economies and the natural resources on which we rely. The impact on lives around the world has been devastating. Our Caribbean brothers and sisters in Belize and St. Lucia have faced devastation within the last 30 days, and I wish to extend on behalf of, I'm sure, both sides, our prayers and well wishes as they deal with the issues that they would have faced. These horrific storms are the face of climate risk. However, Mr. President, there is also slow onset consequences of climate change, which are just as debilitating for a country like Jamaica. These include sea level rise, which not only claim landmass, but also increase saltwater intrusion in our water supply, soil quality deterioration, reduction in pollination rates, and a gradual increase in respiratory and skin diseases. Mr. President, for a country like Jamaica, where 70% of its population live within 5 kilometers of the coastline, the obvious risks are there for all to see, or should be. Mr. President, I wish to pause to acknowledge the Climate Change Division at the Ministry, both current and indeed former staff. I wish to acknowledge Dr. Orville Gray and Gerald Lindo, who were there long before my time. I wish to also acknowledge Una Mae Gordon and indeed Leon Roper, who have also left us in recent times. They have ensured Jamaica has a seat at the table and is globally recognized both for our advocacy and our strong negotiating positions. They have, however, also guided Jamaica in tailoring Jamaica's national response, and the team there, no doubt, will carry on that responsibility. Mr. President, in that vein, allow me to provide an update to the Senate on some of the major planned projects for this fiscal year. Mr. President, we have been strengthening Jamaica's capacity to meet transparency requirements under the Paris Agreement, which is commonly called CBIT in the climate change circles. The Global Environment Facility-sponsored initiative seeks to enhance the country's measuring, reporting, and verification capabilities in order to adequately respond to the requirements of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, which include reporting on GHG emissions, mitigation, adaptation, climate finance, and capacity building. The first phase of consultancies were completed during the first quarter of this year and include assessments of 1, gaps, capacity needs 2, ongoing initiatives at the regional, national, and local and sectorial levels, and 3, MRV-related technology. The project is now moving into the second phase of consultancies, which will involve the development of the MRV system with GIS capability and an updated greenhouse gas inventory. This phase of the project will also include the development of a knowledge platform and the establishment of a national training regime to support the work of the MRV system. There are several projects being undertaken under the Green Climate Fund national program. One is support for the readiness preparation in Jamaica, which I will go into a bit later, which has supported the Forestry Department to the tune of $613,000 US. Phase 2 of that project is commencing this year. Facilitating an enabling environment for Caribbean green bond listing on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, completed this year. Exchange, the objective is to assess the debt market and foster a conducive environment for a green bond market through building a green bond market ecosystem. It is done in partnership with the Jamaica Stock Exchange and Dominica with a budget of $582,000. The JSE green bonds are anticipated to raise funds on Jamaica's and regional debt markets to finance environmentally sustainable activities. It is likely to cover engagements in energy efficiency, clean transportation, pollution prevention, sustainable agriculture, sustainable water management, among other key sectoral areas. We have also progressed towards a comprehensive national adaptation planning process in Jamaica. It's called JNAP. It is the focus of the
informative information presented in this video is motivational and is positively aimed at inspiring, educating and entertaining the viewers with the cutting edge of critical reasoning. If you enjoy the contents on the Black Radar YouTube channel, please consider subscribing to show your support.
This is Muta Baruka. We want to present to you a wholesome kind of level of consciousness right now. So subscribe and tell your friend them. This is Muta Baruka.